All right, we're moving on to 4.4. It says we've looked at the sides and angles of various triangles over the past few days and classified triangles based on these features. But are they connected in any way, the sides and the angles? Do the angles affect the sides? Do the sides affect the angles? Let's explore. So it says without doing any measuring, which side of the triangle appears to be shortest and which one appears to be longest. When we're looking at the triangle below, it appears that side B is going to be the longest and side C is going to be the shortest. Without doing any measuring, which angles do you estimate to be the biggest and the smallest? Biggest appears to be angle B, and smallest appears to be angle C. At this point, you guys were supposed to take out a ruler and measure out A, B, and C. I got 5 centimeters, 7 centimeters, and 2.7 centimeters. Then you're supposed to measure out using a protractor the angle measures. You get 34, 128, and 18. It says, what conjecture can you make about where the biggest side is in relation to the biggest angle? It appears that the biggest side is across from the biggest angle, and the smallest side is across from the smallest angle in a specific triangle. You can't say one triangle has a 15-degree angle and the other one has a 22-degree angle, so across from the 15 has to be smaller. It has to be within the same exact triangle. When we're looking at these, it says explain why each of the triangles cannot exist. Well, if across from the biggest angle is the biggest side, smallest angle is the smallest side, on that first one you have two different angles, but across from them are congruent sides. That doesn't make any sense. Across from the 27 should be bigger. The next one are the angles are congruent, so across the sides cannot be a different size, but it shows that they are, so that's impossible. The next one shows a 90-degree angle, which in this triangle is the biggest angle, and 90 degrees across from the 90 degrees is not the biggest side. So that just doesn't make any sense. And then the last one, 5 plus 6 is not greater than 13. So it has nothing to do with across from the biggest angle, biggest side. It's just the fact that this triangle can't exist because the sides lengths just don't make any sense. For your quick notes, the rules are across from the biggest angle is the longest side, across from the smallest angle is the smallest side, and across from the medium angle is the medium side. Also across from congruent angles are congruent sides. This is actually called the base angles theorem. And we would be able to use this later on in a proof. Across from congruent sides are congruent angles. Now to check your understanding here, it says in the triangle below, PQ equals 5.6, PR equals 6.1, and QR equals 5.2. We wrote all those in. It says without using a protractor, put the angles in the order from smallest to biggest. So smallest is going to be across from the smallest side, which is across from 5.2, that's P. Biggest is across from the 6.1, which is going to be Q. And R falls in the middle. So it is going P, R, Q. Now on the next one here, what do we know? Well, we know all of the sides are congruent. And if all the sides are congruent, then all the angles have to be congruent as well. So we're able to set any of those angles we want equal to one another. It doesn't make sense to set something that has a y in it equal to something that has an x in it, because you're not going to be able to solve that because there's only one equation. So in this case, the first thing you would want to do is you would want to solve for, there's a different way you could also do this. So you could have gone over and said 4y minus 8 equals 3y plus 9, solved for y, substituted it in, and found out what you got, and then you could say 5x equals that angle. But what I did was I said, well, if all the sides are congruent, then all the angles are congruent. And if there's 180 degrees altogether, then each one has to be 60. So I could set each one of those equal to 60 and solve. Now the next one says, explain why triangle GHK is isosceles. Well, when you look at this, if you have that 68, the vertical angle is also going to be 68. And now you have 68 and 56. And when you find out what angle is left over, it turns out it is 56 degrees. And if you have two congruent angles, across from them must be congruent sides. Since the 68 is different than the 56 and the 56, then those other two sides are congruent, but the last one's not. Two congruent sides makes it isosceles. Next one, prove that the hypotenuse is always the longest side of a right triangle. The rubric will help you explain this. So in a right triangle, the largest angle is 90 degrees. Okay, I should have put in there because it says it wants you to use the definition of right triangle. So I am actually not liking my key here. I didn't read over what it said. let's just do it verbally. It says, use the definition of a right triangle. I would say, by definition of right triangle, you will have a triangle with one right angle. Explain why A and B are less than 90 degrees. Well, if you have 90 degrees taken, the other two angles will add to be 90. So neither one of them can be 90. They have to be less than 90. Next, locates the longest side using the side angle relationship. I would say, therefore, if 90 is the largest angle, across from it must be the longest side. And then the definition of hypotenuse would be, therefore, across from the right angle is the longest side, and the longest side of a right triangle, or the longest side of a triangle is called the hypotenuse. So I'm going to have to make a new key for this because I did not actually look at the rubric. I had to do that. All right, hopefully that made sense. Now let's look over the homework. On here, it says, list the following from shortest to longest. Well, I had to first find out what that last angle was, and it was 60 degrees. So I know across from the 58 is the shortest, across from the 60 is the medium, and across from the 62 is the longest. So that's how I got the MN, KM, and KN. The next one, list the angles from smallest to largest. We know across from the smallest side is the smallest angle. Smallest side is 5.8, the smallest angle is B. Across from the medium side, which is 6.1, is the medium angle, so that would be A, and across from the longest side is the biggest angle, which is C. So you get BAC. Number 3 says, use your understanding of the relationship between angles in a triangle and their sides to explain why an isosceles triangle must have congruent angles. Be thorough with your explanation. Across from congruent angles must be congruent sides, and vice versa. If it is isosceles, then two sides are congruent, therefore two angles are congruent. Number 4, solve for x in the following isosceles. Well, we know that if those sides are congruent, the opposite angles are congruent. So if one is 2x, the other one's 2x. Therefore, we know that 40 plus 2x plus 2x equals 180. Or you could just say, I have 188 degrees altogether. I'm going to take away the 40 that exists. That is going to be 140 left over. And since they have to be split evenly between those two angles, I divide by 2 to get 70. So 2x equals 70, and x equals 35. Use the angles of the triangle to label the vertices J, K, and M of the triangle such that JK is the shortest. So JK needs to be across from the smallest angle, which is 55. MK is the medium, so it's got to be across from the 60, MK. And then the longest is JM. JM has to be across from the biggest angle. And you can see where I put all those. Lastly, use your understanding of the relationship between angles in a triangle and their sides to explain why all equilateral, all sides congruent triangles must have 60 degrees. Be thorough with your answer. So if all sides are congruent, then all the angles across are congruent. So now you know all of the angles are going to be exactly the same. We also know that the triangle angle sum theorem says that they all add up to be 180 degrees. If you have three things that are all exactly the same and they add up to be 180, the only way is that they are 60, 60, and 60. All right, hopefully that made sense. Thanks for watching.